Basically, I'm responsible for making sure the company as a whole is doing well. So I report to the board of directors, who are sort of responsible for having created the company in the first place. And really, I work with everybody in every department who, I like to think of it as help people do their jobs as well as they possibly can, and give them the tools they need to do their jobs as well as they possibly can. So if you think of it that way, it's like being an enzyme. I help hopefully catalyze some good reactions. I have too many hobbies. This is a problem. So let's see if I can cover them briefly. So I love reading. I've always loved reading. It's part of why I landed here. I didn't grow up reading Nancy Drew so much. I read the Hardy Boys a lot, but I read at least 50 of them. And one of the seminal moments in my young life was when I found out Franklin Dixon was not a real person. I lost a little bit of my youth then. So I love to read. Now I'm using my Kindle. I read everything. I read nonfiction, fiction. I love playing games, not just computer games, which obviously I love to play because we make computer games, but I also love board games. And if you have time, you might sweep around my office. You'll see there's board games literally piled up on shelves and on the floor. And something we do at HeR Interactive on Fridays is we get together over lunch and we play board games. So I love games, and I love music. I have an overwhelming amount of music in my library, and I have not even gotten all of the music that I've collected on CDs and records into my digital library. There's just so much. And I go to concerts and live music all the time. And so I also love photography, and so you can see my photos. Some of these are mine and some of them aren't, but I do photography as well. And that's probably enough, but yes, I have a lot of interests and hobbies in addition to what we do here. Oh, one other hobby. Oh, how could I forget this? This is kind of embarrassing. But my daughter and I have a 12-year-old daughter, and we kind of mutually decided we were going to have a hobby together. So 2 years ago, I took up knitting, and I actually knit. I'm a CEO who knits. So that's a funny story. First of all, I do love Yoda. In fact, there's a little Yoda statue there. But like 15 years ago, I sort of got into this Yoda thing. Yoda was my online name, and I became known for that. And when I was at E3 in Los Angeles, I actually was having dinner with a gentleman named Peter Molyneux, who's a famous game designer. And he told me he knew I was into games and puzzles and Yoda. He took me to a shop in the 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica where they had this life-size Yoda. And he kind of dared me to look at it and maybe purchase it. And I, of course, thought that was a ridiculous idea. That was probably thousands of dollars, and there was no way I was ever going to spend money on something like that. But I made the mistake of asking, and it was only a couple $100, and then I couldn't resist. So, and he's been with me ever since. We definitely want to bring Nancy to other platforms. And we're not ready now to say exactly when that's going to happen, but I can tell you we are actively working on that, and we will bring Nancy to other platforms. So you'll be able to take Nancy with you, and as well as being able to play her on your PC and your Mac. And we do want to continue to offer that as well, so we're not going to abandon what we've always done. So as far as I'm concerned, we will continue to make Nancy Drew games as long as people will continue to buy them, but hopefully we'll be able to sell them to even more people because we'll have them on mobile devices as well as on your PC and your Mac. As to exactly when, we're not quite ready to share that. So the way I got started, I kind of came in through the back door a little bit. I had been making software professionally for about 7 years, and I really wanted to get in the games business. So I started doing kind of side jobs. I did game reviews for magazines and for online. This is back in the 80s, so online was CompuServe, Prodigy, AOL back then. And I was a sysop for CompuServe's gaming area. And I made some contacts with people who had made the jump from what I like to think of as the real world to the game world. And so one of the people I'd met online who did that knew that they had an opening at Sierra Online, the adventure game company from the 80s and 90s. And he said, hey, if you really want to come work in the game industry, they have this opening, send in your resume. So I sent in my resume, and I conned them into hiring me as a producer, which is really kind of amazing because a producer is a fairly high-level job. And Not a lot of companies, like Electronic Arts, probably would not have hired me at that level, but HeR was willing to. So I was one of 2 producers at HeR Online, working on the King's Quest series and a Space Quest series and a bunch of other games, Mix of Mother Goose. So that was in 1991, which I realized many of you were probably not alive then. But so I basically, and it was all, I was living in Detroit, Michigan at the time. HeR Online was in a little town called Oakhurst, California, all the way, literally, obviously, all the way across the country. So in the middle of winter, I got my little car, little Honda Civic, and I drove from Detroit, Michigan, over a couple days, all the way to the mountains of California at the end of December of 1990, so I could start work January 3rd, 1991, and that's HeR Online, and that's how I got started. First, we went to a place called Mammoth Lakes, California, which is on the far eastern side of California, almost Nevada. Beautiful high Sierra mountains, alpine woods, and lakes. It was nice because it was relatively cool there, whereas everywhere else in the country was going through a big heat wave. However, I then next went to Death Valley, the lowest, hottest place in the U.S., where it was 117 degrees. And I did send a picture of sunny June hanging out in Death Valley. Fortunately, he didn't catch fire during his brief exposure to that heat, but it's really hard to describe how hot that is. It was really impressive. Then I went to Las Vegas for a couple days, and then we went to a place called Moab, Utah, which is right in the heart of Canyon Country, Red Rock Canyon Country. So there's several national parks right around it. It's unfortunately, I don't think we're going to be able to do that. The first 2 did okay, but not great. I know they have their fans, but there's not really enough fans, and we have to make our choices. Are we going to spend resources in that, or are we going to spend resources in making it true mobile? What are we going to spend our resources on? And to us, what's important is let's keep making our core line every 6 months like we have been. Keep improving that as we have been doing over the last couple of years, and let's take it to other platforms. That's really our focus right now. Yeah, I think imagine a 100-story tower here in South Bellevue with the purple H and I on the top, a bit like Tony Stark's tower in The Avengers, except it's, instead of in Stark, it says HeR Interactive. Okay, maybe not. Maybe not even something I want, but I think 10 years from now we're doing probably a little bit more than we're doing now. I think we're still doing Anti-Drew games because that's our heart and soul, and Anti-Drew represents a kind of archetype that's important to us in terms of being a resourceful, smart young woman who overcomes obstacles and makes the lives of the people around her better because she helps solve their problems. So I don't think we ever want to lose that thread because that's kind of at her core. I think there may be other things we can do that complement that, and so 10 years I think we'll be doing additional things. And I think we'll be on a lot of different platforms we can't even imagine yet because they don't exist. 5 years ago, there were no smartphones to speak of. There were some, but basically there weren't any. Now it's hard to imagine living a life without a smartphone. I think in 10 years that we're going to see at least 1 or 2 more transformations like that where we don't even know what those platforms are going to be like, but we'll be there. One moment kind of early on that I had fun, a certain amount of fun, because it was an angle of contribution that was probably unexpected. When we were talking about Tomb of the Lost Queen, and we were talking about the music for that, because I love music and I happen to have a very wide spread of music and musical taste and types of music, I happen to have a lot of world music in that. And so I went to the designer Kathy and gave her some cuts from some things and said, I think if we can get like the Doduck sound and we can get some of these other Middle Eastern instruments into our soundtrack, I want to have that feel. I don't want to just do a traditional orchestral score, although that may be the dominant element we will use. I want to work in these ethnic elements because I think that they will really bring the Egyptian feel to life. And she just had never heard any of that before. And so being able to present that and say, hey, you don't have to do this. But in the way we work, we get usually 10 to 12 music samples of what we want for this theme should sound a little bit like this. And so being able to have some of those samples be samples that I had come up with that she would never have been able to come up with was nice. Because it did manifest in the game. We did get some of that in the game. And I think it's, our next game is set, I think we've said this, in Scotland. And so there are points now in that music where it has that feel, and I think that's really important. I don't think we should just have a generic cinematic orchestral score. I think the game's music and sound should fit the location, because location is such a big part of our games. To really sell Nancy's in Scotland. I would say, honestly, it's getting to work with a team where the company's not so big that we don't all know each other. We all know everybody. It's like a family, and everybody has different skills, creativity, and so a lot of our work is collaborative and it's creative. And I can't tell you how rare that is. There are very few jobs for people where you get to be in a creative environment working with people you know and like in a collaborative way every day. Like, that's not normal. We're very, very lucky.